This is what is next. This is, I'm very excited for actually. This is Across the Narva, the Soviet Assault on Estonia, February 1944. Pretty good looking game from Revolution Games. Originally published by a Swedish company, I believe, called Three Crowns. I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago. And Revolution Games brought it over and did some additional development on it. I'm not sure exactly what that means, whether they smoothed out some of the rules or did different art or whatever, but what caught my eye about this was, I really love Revolution's games. To me, they're known as kind of the chip pull publisher because almost all the games I've played from them have featured some sort of chip pull mechanic, which is obviously great for solo gaming and great for this channel and why I'm very excited to play this. But the other reason I picked this up is because it takes place in Estonia. And actually 1 year ago today, I visited Tallinn, Estonia for the first time and had a great time there. It's an amazing country. And I definitely want to go back when COVID is all over. And, I figured, hey, here's a game that takes place in a country I've been to. I'm going to pick it up. Revolution's games are really affordable for what they are. They're usually pretty good. I haven't played a Revolution Games game that I've hated, really. In fact, the one that I own from them, Cell, The Battle of the Bulge, is really good. Also a chip pull game. But I kind of have a thing of picking up sort of obscure to semi-obscure conflicts or topics, and this one seemed like it could fit the bill as something enjoyable for solo play for the channel and an interesting topic. So without further ado, I will show you everything here. So let's start here. Here's the city of Narva on the Narva River. And you can see that at this point in World War II, the Germans had control of the city and basically Western Estonia, and the Soviets are moving in, trying to cross the river, as the title of the game would lead you to believe, to make a push through the Baltics and finally onto Berlin, eventually into Poland, and then to Berlin. So you can see that the game starts here with the city of Narva, where there is a fortress, a medieval fortress, with the Germans basically manning fortified positions, and I'll show you what that looks like. And there's a cool mechanic here. If I should show, you can see that there's a fortified position basically on this side of the river. There's all these fortified positions, and so this SS division is manning those defensive positions. The Soviets are trying to cross the river in behind, and then you've got some German units basically all spread out along the western side of the Narva River, and some other Soviets approaching here from the south, potentially trying to make a crossing at another location. So in terms of a strategic situation, the Germans don't have a lot of units. They're going to get more as the game kind of goes on. But they're essentially trying to hold the city, because if they lose the city, everywhere you see one of these red cubes, that is, if a hex is occupied at the end of a turn by an in-supply Soviet unit in one of those hexes in the city proper, the game is over and the Soviets win. So the Germans need to hold those at all costs. And they do have some tools for doing that related to these fortified positions. So it's going to be kind of an interesting decision that needs to be made here. Do the Soviets kind of put all their force around the city to bring it down and try and take those hexes, or do they swing around down to the south? Now, what's interesting about the game rules and sort of, I guess, the historical situation is that the Narva River, basically from this blue cube all the way south, because this is a winter attack, most of the ground and the water is frozen. However, this particular section of the river, the Germans kept open with dynamite so that it would never froze over. So this makes for a tough crossing point, because you can only actually really cross at these ferry locations, and it takes all of your movement to do that, and you're vulnerable while you're in there. And really, there's only a couple. There's one here and there's one here to get across on the south side. Above this, the river is frozen. You can actually be crossed during winter, the first 7 turns of the game. So that'll make an interesting kind of back and forth situation. You can also see that the terrain is pretty rough. You've got woods hexes here. This is a clear hex. And then these are swamp hexes. And if you've ever been to the Baltics, you know that there's swamps basically everywhere. You can see there's big groups of swamps here, here, here. And so those are, armor can't go in there. The supply gets blocked unless you have a unit in it. So really the important sort of logistical considerations are these lines of transport, both on all sides of the map, really. You've got some roads, some tracks in there. You know, you've got roads in here. There's a main road that comes up to the city, roads that come down to the river. So those are going to be really important. This major railroad is going to be a huge, and highway here actually that go to the city are going to be huge focuses for the German to defend, because if the Soviet unit ever gets along this highway on any hex between the city and the edge of the map, then basically every German unit in the city is put out of supply. So the Soviets are going to have to defend that to the death, basically. The other consideration is that at some point during the game, there's going to be a Soviet naval landing that hits the coast here, which is going to put pressure on the German rear. So they're going to have to be ready for that. So they can't commit too far up here or too far down here, because then they'll be open at the in a very vulnerable spot. So it's a really interesting strategic situation. Now, like I said, the game is chit pull. As you can see, the Soviets have a number of chits. There's some special event chits that are white that come out that affect one side or another, and the Germans have some chits as well. And those chits are the balance of chits and what chits are in the cup are going to change every turn as more chits come in. You can see that the second shock army here for the Soviets gets another one at the end of turn 1, and just fat stacks of reinforcements here. Which is going to be extremely fun. There's a lot of units in this game, and even though it is one map, it feels like a big one-map game. It feels like a game that is, there's a lot going on. But it's actually, the rules are fairly simple. They're only about 10 pages. And actually, because it is chit pull, and the chit pull system is based on organized commands. So, for example, you've got headquarters units. When you pull a chit, you can activate a particular headquarters, which are these pennant units here, and that's their range. And so they can only activate units in their command range that match their formation. So this gray FHH corps can only activate other gray FHH units, which you can see down here and up here. And then there are independent units that can be activated by anyone. So really a turn is not going to be so unwieldy that you have to command every single unit on the map. You're only going to be able to do a couple of formations at a time. So it should make for a pretty fluid play and pretty interesting replayability as well, because the chits you draw will be different and what you choose to do with them will be different every time you play. Primarily, this game is focused on ground combat, but you can see there are air units. The Germans get 1 for the entire scenario. The Soviets, they get 4, and there's more Soviet air units, as you can see on the reinforcement track that will come in. These provide column shifts in combat, but what's interesting about it is that the air units have 2 sides. They have a +2 side for 2 column shifts, and +1 for 1 column shift. Well, why would you ever use the +1? Well, based on which side you use for a combat, it takes an extra turn for them to return. So if you use the +2 side, you've got to wait a turn before that aircraft is going to be ready again. So the decision about whether or not you go all in on an attack only to not have air power the next turn, that's going to be probably key for the Germans more than anyone. What else can I tell you about the game? The terrain is over here, the CRT is over here. The Germans and the Russians use different lines on the CRT, which is kind of interesting, and there's some additional special results for Russians only when they're attacking. So that's about everything. Oh, you know what? The other one thing I do want to mention is that all these black cubes that I've put out here, so these are all victory point hexes. So assuming the city of Narva doesn't fall, the Soviets will get points for holding all of these black marked hexes on the map at the end of the game. So plenty of different approaches they can take, and plenty of opportunities. Should be a real interesting, fun game to play. Very low. This is not next lore, so it should be pretty low friction to me. And hopefully we'll get a nice narrative going, and we'll see how successful or unsuccessful the Soviets will be in punching through to Estonia across the Narva. We're just flying through the first couple of turns here. The game system plays very smoothly so far. You get a couple of chip pulls, you activate those formations. You're not really dealing with all the counters at one time, which makes sort of the decision-making very focused, which is nice. But it also provides a lot of challenges for like command and control as well. And I'll show you some examples of that. But just to recap the first couple of turns, so obviously the siege of Narva continues. The Soviet 30th Guard has moved up into the east here. and they have been, they've got some strong units, and they had some armor arrive this turn, so they've been trying to put the hurt on this hex here. The SS moved in an armored unit there to beef up the defense, but they still took some hits to the fortifications. We did launch some attacks in this area when this HQ activated. It's tough. These units aren't as strong, and without air, you can't really do much damage here, so they took some losses trying to storm those fortified positions. The other thing this HQ has been doing is trying to get units across the river here to, you know, come around the rear, but the Germans have been fortunate with the rolls against them, and they moved in some neutral armored units here who swept in and pushed these guys back to this river crossing, and have surrounded this unit here, who's going to be out of supply this turn if he can't escape. Well, he's going to be out of supply this turn because the turn is over. So he's fully surrounded, and I expect him to be, if not eliminated, at least reduced when an attack is able to kick off. What's interesting here is that, no, he is surrounded, and you can see that these two units here belong to different divisions, but so they can't actually be used until their HQ is on the board. And right now their HQ is not on the board. I think this one's HQ just arrived. No, this HQ, yeah, so the German yellow HQ is actually not arrived yet, so all they can do is hold in place, and so they become sort of these like static positioning barriers that you have to kind of work around. And ditto for this unit here. This unit's HQ is on the map, but he's really far away, so he actually can't be commanded right now. And in general, the German units for over the course of the starting setup are very scattered, and so being able to efficiently use them is tough until you can kind of consolidate their positions. And primarily the Germans have really only true command of the SS units here and some of these neutral units. So, you know, they've been able to stop this river advance cold. And you know, we're gonna see if this stalls out, but I think the Soviets have certainly committed to trying to take Narva with all of this force, and so as the turns go by, we'll see if they can accomplish that. A little further south along the river, there were some attempted attacks across here, but Soviets didn't roll well. This formation's in better shape in terms of being in command. Their HQ is here. So they're going to be able to at least activate if the Germans could ever afford to draw a chit that will activate them. And then just some other stuff to show you. In the first couple turns, you've got a bunch of reinforcements making their way down this road. Hopefully being able to consolidate some of those positions with HQ so that the Germans can at least start to proactively push back some of these attempted crossing by the Soviets. The one other thing I wanted to show as relevant to the city of Narva is this prepared defense track right here. So the city has the Netherlands, I forget what they call it, the Netherlands PD and the Nordland PD, which are the red ones. So each of these hexes represents a different line of fortifications where these units are stationed. And anytime a unit in those fortifications takes a retreat result that is not canceled or a loss, it actually doesn't affect the unit, it affects this track. And so whichever hex they happen to be standing in, this track will decrease. This number in here is a number of column shifts that the defenders get when they're attacked. So you can see that a 3-column shift right now for both of the fortifications is extremely powerful. And because of that, the Soviets have had to pump a lot of their air units into bombing to see if they can, you know, sort of cancel that out. But as you do more hits and as you kind of grind down against those fortifications, you can see that the column shift bonus becomes less and less. Which is a really interesting mechanic and really feels, it really brings out the feel of like a siege where the defenders are just barely hanging on and the attackers are like, if I can just get that little hook, that edge, you know, if I can get purchase, I can really make a breakthrough. So it remains to be seen if the Soviets can do it. The other thing I should mention about this is that the Germans can every turn increase one of these markers by 1, repair the fortifications essentially. So the Soviets, you know, if they go after 1, they're not sufficiently diverting the efforts of the Germans. So you really have to go after both to make the German think about which one needs to go up or down, which one needs to go up for free at the end of the turn. So that's what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to hammer both of them equally so that the Germans are kind of left in a bad position either way. But we're only 2 turns in, and you know, so far so good. I'm really enjoying it, and a bunch more units are about to come on the map in the reinforcement phase, and so we'll see if that makes a difference. Before we get into turn 3, we do have a Soviet amphibious landing being attempted in one of these 2 village hexes here by this unit. So he's going to come, he's going to probably go here. Now, there's no restrictions or penalties for being in a zone of control, but he figures that if he survives the shore bombardment, he's going to be able to displace this HQ, which means this unit and this unit will not be able to be ordered next turn by the Germans. So let's see what we get. The units land in the village, and we get a free barrage roll against them. That's a pretty good roll for the Germans. That is a retreat, so he's got to retreat 1 hex. He'll probably just go here, back off. And now he's going to be out of supply unless, in the next supply phase, unless we can kind of close down some of this. If there's a unit, show you. If this HQ activates and we get this unit able to push the unit here off of this city hex, and he's able to come up this way, we may be able to open this for supply, although I'm not holding my breath. So another wrinkle in the campaign, and we continue on. Quick correction, this Marine unit, Soviet Marine unit, actually never needs supply, which is interesting. So he's actually free to kind of cause havoc behind enemy lines until the Germans shut him down. So that makes the situation even more interesting, and we'll see what kind of chaos he's able to cause this turn. Despite some disorganization, the Soviets have actually made their way across this frozen river here. They found purchase, they've got in supply, and they're going to make a drive towards the road up here to cut off supply to Narva. Annoyingly, this German unit here, who's pretty powerful, is holding this bridge, and that's the only way I can get this armor across. You can actually see off to the south more reinforcements heading in to this area, and you know, they are going to need a place to get across the river, because in a couple more turns it is going to unfreeze above this line, and they're not going to be able to cross it except at ferries and bridges. So we've really got to knock this unit out. So this the 109th headquarters has started moving guys across, and we're going to try and cut this guy out of supply and then attack him when his values have been reduced because of that. There's a lot of crappy terrain up in here, so these guys are going to have a slow go of it trying to get to the road. They're going to have to be careful to stay in supply. They're right now using a winter track under here that's only going to be available for them to use supply for the next couple of turns, so they're going to have to move quickly. In general, one of the themes of the last couple turns has been that the Soviets have not made as much progress as I was hoping that they would be making at this point. And that's in no small part to the just absolutely ineffective attacks they've made up at the city. So they've launched multiple attacks along these positions with air power and just have rolled horribly, self-inflicting wounds to themselves. I'm hoping that if I can get these guys around, we can at least start to make multiple attacks a turn on some of these positions that are weaker. But no hits to the defenses over the last couple turns has meant that the Germans have been able to reinforce there. We've got kind of a mess up here. This HQ came in last turn but was not able to get an activation. They've got to do some command and control shuffling of these units out because this HQ now is being threatened across this river. The Soviets made a breakthrough here, and they're in danger of losing that HQ, which means these guys won't be able to move if that happens. So hopefully the chit trot doesn't go against them. But essentially, they've got the attack power. It's just getting them in the position to be able to do something and not roll ones when they attack is the real problem. So I'm making this turn a huge concerted effort to do as much damage as possible, whatever it takes on these fortifications, to bump down those values, because we've got lots of air power this turn, and you know, better put it to good use. Other than that, there's really only one more major reinforcement turn, which is the turn after, or the next turn, I should say. And then after that, it's going to be work with what you've got. There's a couple more event chits that should work, but the cup is getting pretty crowded. I'll show you that. You can see how many different shits we've got in there, but we're still only 4 Soviet and 2 German activations a turn, so a lot of these won't get drawn. And at this point, it becomes kind of a gotta get lucky to get the right units right army chits drawn so that the right headquarters can activate. I've actually positioned a headquarters in such a way that we get a lot of flexibility. So this headquarters, this HQ here can actually activate this unit, I believe this unit, and then all of these southern ones who've really had not much to do in the game so far. It's going to be kind of tough to get across here because it's not frozen, even though these are weaker units. So we'll see if anything down there develops. But at this point, a lot of these reinforcements are rushing in to kind of push this bulge in sort of the later stages of the game and hopefully cut this road off, which is going to make this job a lot easier. After an air-supported attack from the Soviet Marines here, they were not able to dislodge them, and unfortunately the 20th SS, who was just up the road, managed to activate, come in, and eliminate that Soviet Marine unit, so much for that idea. That also obviously put these guys back into supply during the supply phase, so tough sledding right now for the Soviets. They've got a lot to do and a lot of material to do it with, and they're just not quite getting the right order of activations they need to really capitalize on the momentum that they're trying to generate. Well, a change in fortune for turn 5. First chit out of the cup was Stavka Directive. That allowed the Soviets to make 2 attacks anywhere on the map with every adjacent unit, whether they were in command or not. Combined with the air forces that were ready this turn, that led to a huge hit on the Nordland prepared defenses up in Narva. So we are now 1 step away from destroying those and being able to really push in on the city. We also saw some fighting down here in the south, where the Soviet 124th was able to come in with some assault guns. They were able to destroy this unit here, push across. They're going to try and surround and circle all of these units down here to get them out of supply to make them easier to attack. Obviously, we need the right chit activations for that, but if they can do that, there's not a lot preventing them from coming here and here for the victory points that those supply hexes are worth. All right, turn 6, very productive. We actually had some really great results with the 30th Guards. They were able to make their first couple of breakthroughs into sort of the outskirts of the city. We knocked the unit out of here, took that hex, knocked the unit out of here, took that hex. We're going to try and pincer this 20th SS unit, which actually showed up last turn by coming into the city to provide support. If we can take that out, this guy's out of supply, and we can take him out pretty easily. So really good results. The defenses on the red side of the city are at now 1. The Germans frantically trying to rebuild them, and obviously a lot of attack strength still in here, so we can hit this guy if we need to from all the way around. So that turn actually worked out pretty well, and we've got another turn where there's lots of air power coming back, including the Soviet bomber, which provides 3 column shifts in combat, so we may be able to make even more progress this turn, which is going to be necessary. We also managed to get in position up here with the 14th Corps and some neutral units, so that will be useful for starting to hit the orange defenses on this side, although I'm probably going to exploit the weakness on the south side of the city first with all my resources, because that's the one that is going to pay more dividends. The other area of kind of hot action this turn was, again, in here around this German unit. I actually drew a barrage, managed to pin him, but wasn't able to capitalize on it. This unit held out stubbornly for another turn, giving him supply. And as you can see, the German 214th Corps has moved in and made contact here, stopping this advance. So we have some work to do down here. I'm thinking that we might need to bring in some reinforcements from the south who have yet to move from the turn they came into the map. But if we can get them sort of across this ferry, we can get them moved up across this ferry, we might be able to at least put some pressure here and kind of relieve that, so we can kind of sweep these guys aside. Actually, to the north, you can see that up here, right on the edge of the screen, this is the hill. This is this ridge that's worth points for the Soviet player. So that might be something that these guys try and lunge for if they can get some backup. We are heading into turn 7. Turn 7 is the second to last turn before the rivers unfreeze. So if I'm going to get some of those reinforcements across easily, I'm going to have to do it now. But so far, great game, really enjoying it. The action has been back and forth. Just when I think the Soviets have stalled out, they made a great breakthrough. And the state of the map, you can see lots of units on the map now. And you know, I just wish I had more more action commands per given turn to be able to use all of them. Man, this game is so interesting. It doesn't move a lot because of sort of the restrictive terrain and Zoc rules, which are pretty sticky, but there's a lot of movement in terms of the situation. So even though units aren't doing a lot of mobile stuff, certain things can happen that can really change the sort of course of what's happening. So we'll start with the city of Narva proper. As you can see, we're driving in from the south, eliminated 2 SS units with a air-assisted barrage attack here that basically cleared them out, allowed sort of, we're basically 1 hex away from some of these victory point areas, and even with the 20th SS and their defending, it's going to be a real tight defense for the Germans. They're going to have to really manage this properly in order to not lose some of these hexes. This is an auto victory hex, and it looks like I can take it, but actually the river goes through here between the two, so I've got to figure out a way to get there. I think that's probably the best hope for the Soviet victory at this point. And so when I talk about the situation changing, here's a perfect example of that. So the Soviet 117th Corps down here, they were originally trying to push across this river and get up to this road to cut supply. But because of this breakthrough here, and because now this unit is essentially the only thing holding the western edge of the city, it now may be to my benefit to see if I can get up through these swamps, clear this unit, and get up here in the turns that we have left and you know, grab some of these victory point hexes, which are very lightly defended. And so if a Soviet attack from the rear can happen, there's not much the Germans can do about it, especially if they don't get the right activation shits. So these guys have actually been, I haven't activated them in a couple of turns because I've had sort of more important things I needed to accomplish, but now they've suddenly taken a priority, and they're able to be activated by both the 2nd Shock Army HQ, and there's another HQ off to the south that you can't see that can activate them as well. So we could be looking at potentially almost a 75% encirclement of the city of Narva itself. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. The Soviet air power at this point is so vastly outclasses what the Germans have. I think the Soviets have 6 available air units to them, sort of trading off every turn because they're using maximum air barrage. And the Germans only have 1, and they used it 2 turns ago to defend against an attack. So they didn't have it this turn, and that's kind of what made this possible. So a pretty interesting situation. Some other developments down here, we'll take you down to the next sort of area on the map. So obviously the Soviet 109th Corps had some success getting across this part of the river here, but in addition to this corps moving up, the Germans also moved up the 58th Corps in here to kind of block a lot of this road transport. So they are going to have a hard time getting out of this, but they accomplished their mission, and that was to take this hex. They eliminated, basically in a surrounded attack, the out-of-supply FHH unit that was here, who was pretty powerful, but he was halved. So this is victory points for the Soviets, and they should be able to hold this till the end of the game. I'm not really too concerned with trying to break out of this. That is a strategic victory for them. That was what they were sent here to do, and they did it successfully. And then finally down here in the very southwest, what seemed like it was going to be an easy encirclement of these units along the river has turned into kind of a stalemate. The Germans were able to draw the Army Group Narva command shit, which allowed them to activate a headquarters anywhere on the map. In consecutive turns, they drew that shit. So they've activated this 122nd Corps HQ twice and have been able to move up from the west and block off what was going to be sort of a strategic encirclement here. So that's going to be hard to crack. Maybe if I dedicate some air superiority to this, I might be able to, but that seems like a waste at this point. The the 122nd Corps HQ here has now all of its units under its command, and so it may be able to attack across. I believe there's a ferry. Yeah, there's a ferry here, and there's a bridge here. So it may be possible to dislodge one of these units. Probably that one will be the easiest. But again, these armory units can't cross, well, they're assault guns, mechanized units. They cannot cross this river except at this bridge. So this is the sort of keystone hex there that is going to be what determines whether or not there's going to be any more advances in this area. All told, the strategic situation, it's looking like the Soviets, if they're going to win, are going to have to take one of the auto victory hexes. I don't know that they have enough oomph left in the 4 turns that are remaining in the game to be able to, grab this ridge. They might be able to take this point here. They've moved an HQ and some forces down. There's some damaged German armor here, but I guess it's all going to depend on really what the chit draw looks like, which is, I think, part of the reason why I like this game so much and I'm having so much fun, is that the decisions you're making on the chit draw are very tactically oriented. What does the chit you just drew allow you to do best at any given situation? So there's not a lot of hemming and hawing over, missed opportunities. You're basically trying to do the best that you can on any given activation. So that's where we stand. This is the end of turn 8. We've got 4 more turns left. There are a couple of new special event chits in the cup, one of which will withdraw this German core here, and another one which will actually withdraw this Soviet HQ, which would be bad news for any movement down here. So we'll see how it goes, and I will check in a couple turns. It's getting sporty now. So the Soviets have cut deep into the southern part of the city proper. They've actually got units in the city here. That's victory points. There's another unit in the city here. But essentially the entire southern defensive line has fallen at this point. It's been breached at every location, so there's no reason for the Germans to continue to try and rebuild that. They're still holding strong on the north side of the city, but it's only a matter of time, really. These are huge stacks. The Soviets have massive air power, and I marked this hex here in white. This is the last hex in the city that is providing supply to all of these units. So if the Soviets manage to take this, it's basically all over for the units across on the eastern side of the river. And then it will be time to kind of come in here and see if they can pull out the auto win. This over here looks like kind of a mess, but there's actually been some movement over here. Let's see if I can show you that. So the Soviet 8th Corps has pushed down, has rescued this unit from being out of supply by eliminating a Soviet unit that came on the wrong side of the river and got caught out. And then here, the Soviets tried to make they basically want to capture this hex for the points, this city, which is Hungerberg. They successfully barraged the Marine unit guarding it this turn. So he had to fall back. So this is wide open. So if the chit draw comes out in the appropriate order, they'll just be able to hop across and take that particular location. More points for them. Elsewhere, there has been a lot of heavy fighting here. Finally got the armor across the river. Soviets have counterattacked, or excuse me, the Germans have counterattacked a couple times, caused a loss on the Soviet side. And then you can see up here the Soviet 6th Corps coming down this road, and they're gonna, if they can get an activation, they're gonna try and hop across as well and just kind of overwhelm these guys. Now there is a chit in the cup that's going to cause all of these units to disappear. So if it gets pulled this turn, then suddenly there's nothing between them and the north. So that could also be very bad. And then finally, these guys are making a break for the western side of the city. They're across the river. They're in this swampy area, kind of a risky march. The FHH Corps up here, which is a Soviet armored corps plus motorized infantry, they were able to come up from the west and kind of block this approach. And these are big units in here, so it might be tough for that to happen at this point, but never say never, I guess, with all the air power the Soviets have. So that's the state of the game. Soviets are so close to the auto win, and they're probably going to push it ahead further this turn. If the city gets out of supply, then the Germans are going to have some real problems. We are heading into turn 11. There are 2 turns left in the game, and the Soviets well ahead of the historical schedule. I don't believe they took the city of Narva until June or July, until the summer, and this game ends at the end of April. So they have done outstanding so far in this operation. Well, that is all she wrote. Final turn of the game. The Soviets, this is as far as they can make it into the suburbs across the river of Narva. You can see here that the unit that was here actually got pushed out by some Soviet artillery, but this ended up just becoming a labyrinth of zones of control, and no one could really move in there. And on the final turn, the Soviets rolled horribly on their assaults in those positions, even though most of these units were out of supply because of the Zoc being put in that hex. So they were halved. The Soviets just couldn't find the rolls that they needed to kind of push some of that stuff out of there and start eliminating units. So they were only able to get as far as this hex here. That was worth some points. But unfortunately, the gates to the city were closed to them. And it's just an unfortunate order of activations on the final turn as well. I mean, the Soviets had so much air power, but they just kept drawing army commands that were just not related to this whole situation. What else on the final turn here? We also did manage to come across and take this, so that was victory points. The Marine unit that started the game there ended up finally completing its mission. It was a little frustrating over here, well, for a number of reasons. It was a little frustrating over here. This core, I just could never get them activated at a point where they could do something. The HQ that could command them was the 2nd Shock Army, which was put to much better use, or I thought was put to much better use, trying to drive into the city, and they were having success, so I didn't want to abandon that momentum, and we just could never get the 117th where they needed to go. And ultimately you can see the FHH division here moved up, blocked the roads, and so they were probably not getting through there without a huge expenditure of resources. It does make me wonder if I had taken the guards, because they started the game in here, and I had, as what historically happened, I believe, was the guards tried to cross the river here, and were kind of pushed back and locked into a stalemate, similar to what happened here. But I wonder if that force coming here, along with this corps, pushing up across the river there and making an end around for these victory hexes may have been a better strategy. I think the next time I play, if I play the Soviets, I might try an alternate strategy. Even though we did find good success here, we did destroy the Nordland prepared defenses and got into the suburbs. This just became a rat's nest. Lots of attacks back and forth at kind of middling odds. A lot of units being reduced and destroyed. We finally, at the end of the game, got the 6th Corps down, and some of them across the river. Just ran out of time to be able to do much with them. On the final turn, we did draw the 214th withdrawal, so if there was another turn in the game, they were going to come out, which could have changed things, but it didn't happen in time. And ultimately, this was slow going. Again, another situation where I may try something different on the next time that I play it. So I'll show you the final state of the map here. Soviets, really, most of their gains came around the city of Narva. They pushed in quite strongly, and they managed to capture some of the key points along the river. But with final scoring, they only scored 21 points, which means it's a German major victory, which means the Germans' defense held long enough and strong enough, despite all the losses and the pushback, that they ended up winning this game, and I guess means they won the operation. Like I said, the Soviets didn't take the city in reality until summer So this probably, mimics what that was like for them in the first, assault waves in February through April. So what do I think of the game? Well, I think the game is great. I think it's fantastic. It's evocative and thematic and seamless to play, very little player friction. There's enough chrome to make things interesting, but not so much that it bogs down the rules. Pretty standard hex encounter. The chip pull stuff is awesome. It makes every game different. Replayability is super huge with this game. Chits you draw will be different every game. What you choose to do with them will be different every game. And there's a lot of different kind of avenues to explore and try with this game based on that. And so some games might be heavy into the city like I was. Some games might be trying to, come around and cross the river at different points. But I highly recommend this game if you're looking for a smooth playing. I won't say quick playing because it's 12 turns and it could be all day face to face. But if you're looking for a smooth playing chit draw hex encounter World War II game, this is an interesting topic with a focus on meaningful decisions rather than trying to come to grips with the rules. I mean, the rules are 10 pages, like I said. So this is fantastic. This is a fantastic production by Revolution Games. There's other games in this system that I want to try now, having played this, because I had so much fun with it. And this is one of those games that I could see myself setting up again immediately and going to town and having fun, just because of the variety here. If I have any complaints on the negative side, I would say that, and this is probably because of the terrain, but it's really hard to get maneuver going in this game. So you can see a lot of these, a lot of these stalemates along the river. The Germans played well to block them, and I think, if you want a game of being proactive and maneuver, playing the German side might be a little boring to you just because they're in a fully defensive posture. They're not going to be making a lot of attacks, although they will have the opportunity in certain situations. But they're primarily playing a positional game. Make it as hard as possible for the Soviets to do what they want to do. Use the terrain to your advantage. Use the river lines to your advantage. And they don't get a lot of activations every turn. They get about half as many as the Soviets most turns. Or 2/3 as many. So you've really got to play smart with the activations you do get. But that can feel like you're not doing much. That is definitely something, as a German face-to-face player, you may have to grapple with. But if you like that sort of puzzle of defending, then, this game will give you that if you play the Germans. On the other side, at this point in the war in 1944, the Soviets had a pretty powerful military machine, which I don't know is totally reflected in the unit strength here. The sides are pretty comparable in terms of the units that they have and how much attack power they can bring to bear. Really, it's a function. Anything you want to achieve in this game as far as breakthroughs is going to be a function of use of aircraft. So you're gonna have to make those decisions smartly. And again, that's another point in the game's favor is the decisions are meaningful. They matter. What you choose to do and how you choose to use your resources is going to be whether you succeed or fail. The other negative thing I would have to say about the game is actually I love the map art and I love the color scheme that's in play here, but my biggest pet peeve are these road lines. They're extremely tiny. Here's at my finger. They're extremely tiny, and in a lot of terrain they really blend in with the background, unless you're looking super closely. Like you can see here, there's a road and a minor railroad, and they're so thin and narrow that you've really got to get close to the map to figure out, especially when you're doing reinforcement moves and strategic movement, like what exactly you're looking at. And it gets really complicated. You've got tracks mixed with roads. This is a major road, which is not the same as this, which is a major highway. They're both different shades of red, but both the same width. It's like this is a highway, but this is a road. So I just wish there had been a little more contrast and that some of these lines were thicker. I think the mistake here was that a lot of these lines of travel are the same width for the most part, or close enough to not be able to tell at a distance. But in something like Next War, the highways are really thick, so you can see at a glance that's a high bandwidth transportation route. And here it gets so involved, and certain roads like duck into a hex briefly, which it's just kind of hard to follow sometimes. So I love the map art. I just wish that the road network was a little more defined. But overall, highly recommend if you're looking for a World War II hex encounter game that's is not so heavy on the rules, but extremely fun to play. This is a great one. And, you know, I'm going to be looking at other games in the system. I think the next one at some point I'll be checking out for the channel is Königsberg, which chronologically takes place after this in 1945 and is the Soviet attack on East Prussia. So hope you enjoyed that. And yeah, I'll be back with some more content soon.